Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 309. And today in the show, we're chatting with a Wired to Hunt listener named Luke Brewster, who just so happened to kill the largest deer ever killed by a hunter last year. And we find out what happens when an everyday average hunter gets struck by whitetail lightning. While I got you here before we start the main show, just want to give you a little heads up. We've got a long introduction today. It's almost a two-part podcast. Part 2 is with Luke Brewster, and we're talking about this experience he had. Part 1 is getting to chat with my co-host Dan about his South Dakota mule deer hunt and a little bit about an upcoming hunt of mine. So if you want to get just to the Luke Brewster portion, you can fast forward about an hour. But if you want to hear our stories, stick around. It's a good one, but a long one. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by Onyx. And I'm here with my good buddy, my brother from another mother, the man with a bigger beard than me and one less finger, Dan Johnson.
I just trimmed my beard too.
Does it look sharp?
It looks good. My wife actually walked by me and said, "You don't look so disgusting anymore."
That's good.
I had a big one, like the upper lip, the mustache part of it was coming way down over my lip. So I was getting food in it all the time.
Yeah.
Just like it was a man's beard. It was awesome, but I had to trim it.
I understand that. When are you going to drop the
hammer?
You
understand?
Yeah. Oh, I totally understand that, Dan. I got a man's beard. What are you talking about?
Good.
When are you dropping the hammer though? Are you going to drop the hammer?
I don't know. I didn't drop the hammer last year.
No. For those that don't know, Dan drops the hammer usually right around the rut each year by trimming his beard into a Fu Manchu of sorts. Right.
So, and I don't know if I'm going to drop it or not this year. I usually drop it once a year, and I can't remember if I already dropped it this year. Did I drop it on my elk hunt? I can't even remember.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, you didn't. You should. Someone.
Maybe I'll drop it on November 1st.
Yeah, someone told me I should drop the hammer this year. Yeah. Do you want to do matching Fu Manchus for the rut?
Maybe. It depends on, I don't know. I like it, but now I'm starting to get old, right? So I have white hair in just one side of the hammer. So it just looks really weird.
Oh, well, guarantee if I did it, the whole thing would look really weird. So you don't need to feel bad.
Buddy.
Yeah. So, Dan, today, want to do a bunch of stuff today. We are going to talk a little bit about your South Dakota mule deer hunt.
Okay.
We're going to talk a little bit about my Boundary Waters backcountry whitetail hunt, which I'm leaving for tomorrow. But we also have a main guest on the show too. And that part it's a different kind of show than we've done in the past typically. We usually don't ever talk about world record deer. We're usually not chasing interviews with people who killed some huge high scoring deer. We've never done that on the Wired Hunt podcast. And so this show is different because we're not typically talking about that kind of thing. But today we sort of are. On a lot of past episodes, we talk with people who maybe have, they've got pursuits for certain size deer. And you and I, Dan, of course, we enjoy chasing big old bucks, and we talk about that. And we've got our own goals sometimes. And sometimes we talk about size of deer. Sometimes we talk age of deer. Sometimes we're talking about just the circumstances of the situation. But we've never really gotten to the whole scoring hysteria other than talking about sometimes the concerns around it, potential
referencing
it, negative aspects of that, and how it can all go too far,
Yeah, absolutely.
So that said, though, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with big bucks. They're exciting. They're cool. We get geeked out about it. You get a big buck on trail camera, you're excited. I'm excited. That's just not what we've been mostly focused on here. But
right.
Last year, a hunter, a guy named Luke Brewster, he killed a giant buck out in Illinois, and the pictures were going all over the internet. I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, that is a crazy looking deer. Well, in January, news broke that this deer was the new world record, the highest scoring, biggest deer ever killed by a deer hunter ever in the world.
With a bow too, right?
Yes, he killed it with a bow. But this is bigger than any buck even killed with a gun too.
Yeah.
Non-typical. And I remember hearing that story, and someone, like, I can't remember, it might have been, I was going to Mexico for that Coues deer hunt, and one of my buddies, like, the news came through. It was like the day the news went live at the ATA show or something. Someone's like, oh man, you gotta get that guy on the Wired Hunt podcast. And I was like, nah, that's not really our thing. But like a week or two later, Spencer Newharth got in touch with me and said, hey, I ran into Luke at the show. And he came up and talked to me and said, like, he's a huge Wired to Hunt podcast listener and basically learned in part how to hunt from listening to this podcast.
Oh, nice.
And so that got me interested. Like, wow, that's really interesting. So I reached out to the guy and just kind of like, hey, what's the deal? I heard that you've been finding, the podcast helpful and everything. And he basically explained that, yeah, he's a new hunter and he kind of figured it out by checking out resources like this, listening to you and me talk about deer and all of our guests and stuff. And then he kind of got struck by lightning and ended up killing this once-in-a-lifetime deer. So that got me intrigued. What happens in that situation? What happens when a normal, unsuspecting hunter, a new hunter, a member of the Wired Hunt community, someone just like you or me or our listeners, what happens when that person heads into the woods one day and ends up killing the biggest deer of all time? How does that change your next week? How does that change your next hunting season? How does that change your life? I don't know. Is that a cool thing? Is that awesome? Or does that become a negative thing? I mean, I could imagine all sorts of scenarios. All that attention, all the social media hysteria, is that overwhelming or is that fun? Is killing the biggest deer of all time, is that like an uplifting experience or is that toxic?
Especially in today's so especially in today's society where on social media people are only reading headlines, right? So you come across world's largest buck killed in Illinois, then automatically people go high fence, outfitter.
Oh yeah, right.
They're like poached, whatever. Must be nice to be rich or whatever, and they're not. They don't want to hear the story.
Yeah, it's very easy for that stuff to get nasty. And I think you and I have even experienced some of that on a micro level, with our own things going on and the negativity around it. So that's what I've always wondered. Like, what happens when your buddy shoots this deer, when the normal guy next door has this thing happen, gets struck by a whitetail lightning? So that's what we're going to talk about with him. This isn't going to be about glorifying antler inches. We say it all the time, Dan. We're all about hunting your own hunt, having a great experience, chasing your own personal goals. But what happens when something crazy like this walks into your life? That's what I want to get into with Luke. But before that, though, I do want to talk about what happens when crazy things happen in your life or my life, like our recent hunts. So before setting the stage for my Boundary Waters hunt, I guess, you just got back from South Dakota. I enjoyed your Instagram stories. I like to follow along and seeing what was going on there. From the outside looking in, it looked like it was like an action-packed hunt. And I know you've got a podcast that's either out right now, I think it's out, or coming out soon, that goes into like all sorts of detail on this. But can you give us at least like a Cliff Notes scoop on how it went?
Yeah. So if you want to check out the full story of part 1 launched Monday, part 2 launched Wednesday. So if you want the long version, go to Nine Finger Chronicles podcast, and it's called Sodak Mule Deer Hunt, right? It's pretty simple. But here's what I will say. I was looking forward to my elk hunting trip, but I was really, really looking forward to this South Dakota trip. I don't know what it is about that type of terrain, and me and you, we've discussed this before, right? You're a mountain guy.
Yeah.
I'm this prairie guy with the rolling hill. Like, I don't know what it is.
Easy on the knees.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I wish I could say
not
that,
but
easy. There was a lot of up and down on this hunt. But man, we went out there. My buddy drove from New York. He spent the night at my house. We got up at 4 a.m. on this was 2 weekends ago now, and got in the car on a Saturday morning. Drove out to South Dakota, hopped out of the truck, pitched a tent, and that's how we got there. And just the drive in. I don't know. Whenever you go to a new place, Mark, it was probably unsafe for both of us to be in a vehicle at that point because we're not even paying attention to the road. We're just looking out the window, like, oh, there's an antelope. Oh, there's a deer. Oh, and just watching the terrain change once you get a little closer to like the Missouri River.
Oh, yeah. I love it once you start crossing that. You can see the habitat transition.
Right. Absolutely. And like just the terrain coming down into the valley of the river and then coming back up, and it's all these flat tops with these big dugout drainages and it's just amazing. So I was so amped. I just could not even relax. I was just boom, 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 like fired up, beating the internal drum, so to speak. And we get out there and we get to the parking spot at this 33,000 acre public land spot. And sure enough, there's 2 more vehicles there. And I'm just like, oh man, of all the places we decided to park, we park. But as we're getting ready and packing up our packs to hike in and set up camp, 4 people came out of there, and they were just these day hikers, I guess. They were just up there taking pictures.
Nice.
So we hike up. We hike in about 1.5 miles, set up camp, and by that time it's getting dark, so we eat and go to bed. Now, here comes one of the most spectacular parts of this entire trip, and it is the fact that we woke up Sunday morning and not really knowing what to expect. We were going to hike to the top of this mountain, or this it's not a mountain, but it's the highest point in the area, right? But
kind of like a butte, right? Something like that.
Yeah, butte. Yeah, kind of. Just a big hill, right? So just take the Rockies and shrink them down is kind of what it felt like to a different scale. So we climb up about 100 feet, and that's where we're going to glass for the morning. As we're getting ready, I see a little shooting star go across the sky, and I'm just like, oh man, this is awesome. I just saw a shooting star, kind of a good luck. Messing around a little bit, look back up in the sky just because the stars were so brilliant. And I don't know if you've ever seen one of these types of shooting stars, but it must have been closer to the ground. It looked like a missile going through the air. It was like you could see not just a white streak, but the color of this shooting star. I could see it. I could see the bright white up front. I could see the smoke trail, and I could see the illumination, like orange and red of the fire that was coming off behind it.
Wow.
And it just went across the entire sky. It was like a gigantic firework that just went. And I swear for a second I heard it. That's how it was bananas. I literally geeked out and lost my mind. I was like, "Oh my God, did you see that? Oh my God."
But did you consider, are you 100% certain whether or not that was a UFO?
Yeah, I don't know. It could have been a UFO. It could have been. But man, it was one of the most amazing things I have ever seen out in nature.
That is cool. Very cool.
I don't know why I'm geeking out about it so much. It's just I can't even explain to you what it I don't know. It just got me geeked for that entire trip. It was like the starting
good start.
point.
It's a very good start.
So we climb up and we start glassing that morning. Both of us are pretty jacked up. And we glassing a little bit. We see a couple mule deer does way off in the distance. We saw some whitetail does way off in the distance, and we were in a kind of an area where it was next to a big like a river system that kind of led. There were some creeks that led up into these big drainages and valleys, and so we were seeing a mixture of whitetails and mule deer. So that was kind of cool. And just to talk about our expectations real quick, we went into this trip just for the experience, right? We had this talk, like, what are your expectations? Like, what do you want to do? And both me and the guy I went with were like, if I get a shot at a doe, I'm taking it. And that's the same with me. You know, I go on this elk hunting trip, walk away with nothing. I wanted to walk away with something on this trip, whether it was a buck, a doe, anything. But we both realized that this is a completely different environment and a completely different strategy for hunting. So we were like, you know what? If we can learn something, take away, and then come back next year and capitalize, that would be awesome. But we're here to have fun. We're here for the new experience. And so that we didn't really have any expectations going into this hunt other than to learn and have fun. But we were seeing deer that first morning. So it was like, okay, we have 5 days left. Let's get this is a good start. At least we know where they're at and we know where we need to be, at some point throughout this trip. So we're glassing for a couple hours, nothing real close. Everything was like a mile out. We'd notice it through the binoculars, and then we would set up the spotting scope to identify a little closer and say, okay, well, let's wait for them to bed down. That was our thing. Find them, try to locate where they were bedded down, and then go make a move on them. Right. So we saw these does way in the distance, and I said, well, let's go around this big hill and get to another big hill that's blocking off a part of this valley, and see if we can't see a little bit more of this big drainage. So we're walking, and this is a lot of the terrain out there is this waist high grass. It's almost like tumbleweed that you're walking through. So it's real dry. It's real brittle. There's some green grass, but it's about waist high. And then what's not grass is this. Imagine putting drywall plaster over top of popcorn. And that is what you're trying to walk on to go up and down some of these hills. And it got to a point where we kind of had to have a talk with each other and say, we can't walk up this stuff anymore because we're slipping and sliding and falling down. And we had to learn how to take the long way, the long route sometimes, just because some of this ground was unsafe to walk on.
Huh.
Yeah, just really, really weird. I'd never experienced anything like that before. And even though the drop wasn't like falling off a mountain out in Colorado, it would have been significant, and you would have slid all the way down. And like we slid a couple times to where we were gaining speed and we couldn't really stop ourselves on our butts. Right. And so we had to kind of lay our packs down and put our arms out, and we each had a trekking pole that we were digging into the ground. So we kind of, let's stay away from that. So we look up there, and then we start hearing voices. So we watched two hunters come out of one part of this valley. So we just kind of assumed that part of the valley is trashed for the day. We stay and we glass a couple more mule deer does. We wait for them to walk by, and then we drop down and walk another 1.5 miles into this big plateau, basically, that's in the middle of these two drainages. And it's high points that we had identified on Onyx. Say, okay, well, these look like two high points that we can go and glass, these drainages. So long story short, we walk in, we identified a water source, like a seep in the ground, which was good because we used that multiple times throughout this trip to get water. That way we didn't have to go back to the truck.
That's nice.
Yeah. That's big because if we didn't find that, we were going to have to spend a lot of time walking back to camp, then back to the truck, then back out for evening hunts. And that actually played a huge role in allowing us to do what we did, because there was a day where I took my pack off, I laid it down, and you kind of, you lean on your pack while you're glassing, and my water port got pressed against the ground, and all my water in my bladder leaked out.
Yes.
So I'm like, I did not drink 3 liters of water today. And it was, long story short, just glad that we found that water so we could pump it up and treat it. Almost stepped on a rattlesnake. We walked up to one of these glassing points, walk up to the edge. There's like this rock configuration, this rock formation, put my boot down on it. And I look down, and about a foot from my boot is a rattlesnake.
Oh man.
And it was intense because it was a big rattlesnake. I don't know.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. Its rattle was longer than my pinky finger. It was a big fat one. Jeez. And, but it didn't want anything to do with us. It rattled a couple times and went back down into this crack. We sat there, took a little nap, glassed, walked across the plateau, did some more glassing. And I'm accelerating this, of course. Every time we stopped to glass, we were glassing, I would say 2 hours at a time, if not more.
Okay.
Just relaxing, getting a lay of the terrain, which we found out in the long run is there's so many cracks, and the terrain there's so many variations in it that if you go 100 yards a different direction and look at the same area, you're finding more cracks. So it's awesome to have onX. And I'll say this, and this is a good plug for one of your partners here. I don't know what we would have done without it, because it allowed us to mark what we saw. It allowed us to mark trails in and out. It allowed us to, and this is the big one, look at a map and identify, here's camp. We need to get here, but we need to do it in the dark.
Right.
Right. So I'm basically, instead of looking at the ground, I'm looking at the ground in the dark, but I'm also got my phone out trying to take the path of least resistance to the morning scout, the next scouting point in the dark. And it was one of the biggest helps for the entire trip, hands down. So
yeah, it comes in very handy for that kind of trip. That's for sure. Right.
Absolutely. So, and then we get back, and this is a cool part. We're all focused on mule deer on the ride out, but then we learn, hey, there's whitetails here too. And they're down in this river bottom. There are a handful of crop circles. And we pop up over this ridge to glass to see if we could see any mule deer coming off these hills into the fields below. But we get there, and there's already like 25 whitetails in this crop circle.
Oh man.
When we get there, but we're still a long ways away, right? We didn't have enough time to make a stock to go there. And we were like, well, we can shoot a whitetail deer at home. Maybe we'll just wait a couple days and see. But then a big whitetail buck popped out of the river bottom, and it would have been too late to go stock. And he was on private ground when we saw him, but it was right on that line, just kind of like your hunt.
North Dakota.
Yeah. So he was right on the line, and we're like, hey, man, maybe the next day we'll set up tomorrow evening and go check him out. Well, I would put him, he was a mile away. I could see him through the spotting scope, but he had a big body. His body was bigger than every other deer in the field, rightfully so as a buck, but his rack was noticeable in the spotting scope, like big. I would have, if he was an 8-pointer, he would have been 140.
Yeah.
If he was a 10-pointer, he probably would have been closer to 150.
That's a big one.
A really good whitetail that got us both excited. Sun went down. We walked back to camp, put the game plan together, and said, okay, well, we're going to go back to that big plateau where we were, the next day. And so, like I said, got out put a path together on onX, got out of camp, walked all the way in the dark, 1.5 miles to this glassing point, and got there just, right before gray light. It was perfect. We dropped down off the hill a little ways so we weren't skylined, and just kind of waited for the sun to come up. And right away we started seeing whitetail does. And what they were doing is they were coming off the tops and then going back down into these drainages to bed throughout the day. And so here's a whitetail or a mule deer doe over here. Oh man, there's 4 mule deer doe over there. Okay, cool. So I turn around, I start making some coffee, and my guy I was with is like, "Hey, man, that one looks like a buck." Put the binos up. Sure enough, it was a really wide, big 2x2, just a really cool deer. And we're like, "Well, let's follow him," right? So we watch him graze for a little bit up top, drops down out of the off the top down in. We lose him, and now we start putting a game plan together, right? I'm finishing up coffee. We're still seeing some does up there. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go here. We're going to do this. Blah blah blah. Put an approach. And as I'm turning around to hand him his coffee, he's got his binos up. He's like, "Hey man, there's 4 more deer coming off the top." Look it up. Pull up the spotting scope, and it was 4 mule deer bucks all together still.
Oh.
Yeah. And there was I want to say a 3x3, a real young one, and then 2 4x4s that were medium range. And granted, I'm telling you this, their size and their age, because just as a reference, we were going to shoot whatever was available right away. I mean, if a doe popped up at 20 yards, we were going to shoot a doe at 20 yards, right? So we watched these 4 bucks, and they were hustling down because this was about 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was almost like they were coming off later than all the other animals. Maybe they were bumped. Maybe whatever, or maybe they just ate too long, and decided, hey, we gotta hustle down. Watched them drop into this drainage, and the last one that came through was noticeably bigger in size and antlers than all of the other ones. So we're just like, hell, if we're going to go do a stock on something, let's do it on this big one. Right.
Uh-huh.
So he drops down, goes behind a couple rock formations, and we're like, okay, we lost him. This is what really impressed me about these animals. They're smart. This buck pops out around a rock formation, walks closer to us. And when I mean closer to us, he's still a mile away, right? But he's walking out around this rock formation, and it's like he's checking out the area before he goes to bed. He goes back down the trail that he came out in, comes up another rock formation. He's looking all around, taking his time. Then he disappears again, walks around, backtracks where he came, then drops down into another cut, and then he disappears. So it told me that they're thinking differently than how you think, right? You think of a deer and you think, or an animal, they can't think like us. When they're hungry, they eat. When they're tired, they bed down. When they're scared, they run away, right? But this guy was saying, I need to check out my surroundings before I go to bed down, because I want to make sure that there's nothing there. So that thought process kind of intrigued me.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this big buck drops down, and I'm like, okay, let's do this. So we talk about how we're going to do this. We identified certain parts, certain terrain features between us and where he was bedding, so that we could creep up behind him without any of these other deer seeing us, because they eventually all laid down, or they all disappeared behind things too. We identified the cut. We identified certain areas to hide behind, or glassing points. We identified the path that we needed to take. Before we headed over there, we needed to drop down. We needed some more water. We needed to use the restroom, and then make our stalk up into this area. So we drop down off the side of the valley that we were on, cross the creek, come back up the other side, hit all those identifiable points so we could glass going into it. But what we found out was that he's deep in this cut, or so we thought. He was deep in this cut, and it started getting warmer that day. It was like 30 degrees in the morning, but it slowly starts to warm up to about 70 70 degrees. We saw him at 8:00. Now just remember that we saw him at 8:00, come down, disappear about 8:30. We get to a point, this rock formation where it's like, okay, this is where we need to drop our bags. And I said, I'm going to go up and I'm going to do some glassing. He needed to treat some of his water. So he's treating his water. I'm doing some glassing. I'm like, hey, look at this. And I say, grab your bow. Let's go. So I just, we were going to do paper, rock, scissors for, to see who was going to shoot first. But it just kind of worked out that I said, dude, let's grab your bow. Let's go. And then he was going to be the shooter on this. And I was going to take lead as far as creeping around the corners. I was going to be working the binoculars. He was going to be the shooter, and also one thing that I really found out about this particular hunt was the teamwork aspect. I really, it's awesome to see a guy go out and do it all by themselves, but it's so awesome to have another guy to bounce ideas off of and like as a shooter, you got a guy running the binos for you. Okay, I don't see him. And then as the bino guy, that you're not a shooter. So it's like we each had these roles going into it and into this stock that it was like, okay, here we are. This is my role. This is your role. And so I would go up and take the lead. I would creep around corners and I would use the binos and whatever. And I would gesture him and he would come behind me and we'd get behind rock formations or trees, work our way closer up in these cuts and, take a look at what's, okay, I can see the shade. Let's look at where he potentially could be bedding. Right. And, all this stuff. Well, as we're working our way up the cut that he disappeared in, we're getting even now with where we saw him drop down off of this rock formation. And all of a sudden we hear boom, boom, boom. And it sounded like something got up and ran. Well, what happened was he was actually down lower, bedded under a tree, not up in the cut.
Uh-oh.
But the cool thing was that our wind was in our favor. We were higher than him and it was blowing down the drainage. So he never did catch our wind, which I think was our saving grace because I can't see him at this point. And, Dan, the other guy that was with me, he says, there he is. I'm like, how far is he? He gets his rangefinder out. Range, can't get a range, stands up a little bit, gets a range, 58 yards, perfectly broadside. And he's just staring at us and we're head to toe camo, right? Hoodies on, masks up, over our face. And he's just looking at us or he's looking at the other guy. Like I said, I'm between a tree, so I can't see any of this go down. And so he gets his arrow ready, draws back and he lets it go. And I hear the arrow go, and then the sound disappears for a split second. And at this point, I'm like, oh, dude, he missed him. But it was, and you could hear it just drill him. And Dan starts to lose his mind. He's like, oh my God, like he hit right where I was aiming. And I pop out around this tree and I'm watching him jump and it just, when a deer's dead, right? Like just gushing blood coming out of his nose. He tries to go back up the same incline, pretty steep incline that he came out. And he didn't make it. Gravity was his worst enemy at that point. Back legs got wide and he just tumbled off the back. And it was the big buck that we watched drop off the top. And we were both in shock. Like, I can't believe that just happened. This was my first ever spot and stock and his first ever spot and stock on really any animal. Right. We're tree stand hunters.
Right.
And, I've done it in Nebraska before, but not at, it's just different terrain, different scenarios. And, we put a plan together, but we also got lucky. Right. This deer popped up and stood and decided to watch us instead of run away. And he waited around too long and the guy drilled him at 58 yards And you walk up on this animal, and it's between 350 and 400 pounds. It is a absolute gigantic bodied animal, ridiculous. And he's walking up on it, and the guy, this is why I like this dude. He goes, I'm going to get so much meat out of this deer. Like, he was so jacked that he's going to be able to get a lot of meat off of this animal. And then he commented on its antlers. But it was real cool because it was about the experience. It was about the meat he was getting off of this. And then you fast forward, man, and we clean it and we pack it out. I'm still in shock over how it all went down. It was amazing.
It's a gorgeous buck.
Oh yeah. It's a gorgeous buck. Taxidermist did a tooth analysis, or not like a full analysis, but did a tooth comparison on it. Said it was a 6.5-year-old buck, and it scored like 151 something.
Nice.
For a mule deer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And first ever pack out. 3.5 miles. And granted, this isn't the Rocky Mountains. Each of us had over 100 pounds in our pack. And we were walking, we dropped down off of this drainage, hit the creeks, had to go up and down a couple, for the most part, it was flat once we got out of the hills. But we followed this old rancher trail back to the truck, 3.5 miles. And I got to the end, and I was so physically drained that I was getting emotional.
Sounds like our first night of elk hunting, Dan.
I know. It was great. It's like every step I took, I could feel more energy draining out of my body.
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was crazy, that emotion. I take the pack off of me, and I couldn't stand up. I had to lay down. Yep. Because you have so much weight on for that long a time and that distance that your body is now compensating for that weight. And I had to lay down and like reestablish new balance out of it all. And I want to say that we didn't really celebrate. We didn't celebrate the hunt until we got the meat back into the cooler in the truck. And that is when we celebrated.
Yeah.
I mean, when he walked up, we had this big old bro hug. We gave each other high fives, but then we instantly knew we got to get this meat out.
Got a lot of work.
We got a lot of work to do. And we did it. We did it all in one trip. And because we were debating going back and making 2 trips, for some additional equipment, like just our bows and a spotting scope and a couple other things. But we're like, dude, we have to do it. Because I don't want to come back in the middle of the night for this stuff.
Right.
Come back and potentially ruin this area again for anything. So we made it one trip, man. And I want to say it is probably one of the most rewarding hunting experiences that I've had to date. Just adding that pack out alone. I think the entire experience would have been different if we were able to load it on a 4-wheeler or a truck.
Oh yeah. It's that much. It's the best type 2 fun you can ask for. It's so painful in the moment, but when you're done, it's such a great feeling to know you did that, and that meat tastes real good after all that work.
Oh man, I made chili with it already, and because he's like, dude, you helped me pack this out. You helped me on this trip. We did this together. He gave me like almost half of the meat, and I was like, dude, hey, I don't need all the meat. Or half the meat, just give me what you want. And he wanted to give me half, so I'm not going to turn it down. So I made one of the best pots of chili I ever made yesterday.
That's awesome.
And dude, I don't know. I'm just geeked. I'm geeked about this trip, and I really haven't even shared my experience with my buck. I mean, so we went into town. We needed ice. We stayed in a hotel that night. So the first thing in the morning, we could, first thing in the morning, we're going to take it to the processor and then take the head to the taxidermist. So we did all those things, came back out to we had to go back to camp, and we made the decision that we're going to try to cut these deer off. And the reason that we're going to go back to camp, tear it down, come back to the truck, drive around the entire 33,000 acres and hit it from the backside is because the weather forecast changed on us while we were out there. And we're talking this gigantic cold front coming through that was going to dump 8 inches of snow, 60-mile-an-hour winds, and the real temperature was like 28, and the wind chill would have been below zero. And we did not have the proper equipment for those kind of conditions. So I said, man, we have to make a game plan on how we're going to adjust to this. And the game plan was, we're going to stick this out as long as we possibly can, and then we're going to leave, because these are dirt roads to get back into some of this stuff. We identified where the deer were at, and walking up some of this terrain in snow or rain or whatever just really wasn't an option. And we each have families, and I don't want to hear that story about a guy who not necessarily gets lost, but tries to do something and be tough, but then loses a toe because of frostbite, or like,
how fitting though would that be for you, Dan?
Right. That'd be a kick-ass story, though, wouldn't it?
Would you feel like more on balance if you had 9 fingers and 9 toes?
If I lost, let's see, it would have to be on my left foot. If I lost the toe on my left foot, it might bounce me out a little bit.
Oh, maybe you should have done it, dude. That could have been really what made your career.
Right. But you know what I mean? Like I don't know if you've ever had to back out because of weather, but it was going to be a 50 plus degree temperature shift.
Yeah, that was a huge storm pushing through there.
Right. Montana got smoked.
Yep.
North Dakota got smoked, and western South Dakota, where we were at, got smoked. And we just were like, okay, we're going to hunt as long as we possibly can. And sure enough, we ended up having to back out. But so later that night, or the day that we dropped all the stuff off at the taxidermist and, loaded up on some more water, took down camp to move. We're like, okay, let's just sleep in the back of the truck tonight. So we drive in to the backside of this public ground, find the spot to where we could drive the furthest. And then we were going to walk up to where these deer were coming off. And it was a warm day, 2 days in a row. So, and this front was moving in overnight. And we said, okay, let's get in there a ways and find a way to find a spot to glass to see, maybe we can see these deer coming out of these drainages to feed at night. And then maybe backdoor them, find a way to get in between them and the drainage for the morning hunt. So that way I can shoot one coming down back into bed. Well, we pack up, I shoot my bow a couple times, start walking towards the hills, get up in the hills a little bit. We bump a couple mule deer doe. We bump a couple whitetail doe, and go about another, half a mile in, and out of the corner of my eye, I see like just this white flicker, like a bug landing on a deer's ear, and it just flipped his ear. That's it. And I look over in the shadows of one of these hills, which was about 100 yards away. And I just had this gut feeling. I knew what it was. I'm like, that's a mule deer. Didn't know what it was. Mule deer. And I just said to the guy, keep walking, just keep walking. And what we found out is that if these deer see you and you stop, they'll run. But if they see you and you keep walking, they will stay there. As they feel that if they're still, you're not going to identify them. And so what we did was I just put the binos up while I was walking, and it was a mule deer buck sitting right there. And I said, just keep walking, keep walking. So we walked out of his line of sight, and then I started my spot or my stalk. I had him kind of in a position to where he could see the hill that he was bedded on, the top of it. And he was, and he could see if he was going to run away, he would be able to see that. If I did something wrong in this stock. So we get there, and I'm just like, I need to loop all the way around to the backside because the wind was coming over top of this hill to where he could smell anything coming over the top of the hill. So I had to approach it from this at an angle and not come at the tippy top of the hill, but come at an angle. And I walked all the way around. I started ranging like bushes in the side of the hills and just breaking the entire stalk down into like 10, 20, 30 yard increments. Like, okay, I need to take my time. I need to go 10 yards, start walking real close. And the closer I got, the more careful I was with every step, to the point where I was just slowly setting my foot down, not taking a step, but just basically balancing on one leg and just slowly putting all the pressure down on my foot, just like not all at one time, just slow. And that grass was still really dry and the wind was blowing pretty good. And I get to the top where I'm just about able to peek over, and the wind just stops. And I could start hearing, and it was this buck breathing.
Really?
I could hear him panting almost.
Wow.
It was like 75 degrees. And I'm just like, no, what is that noise? And then as I'm creeping up over the top, I dropped my binos. The only thing I had was my rangefinder and my bow. So I'm creeping over just like an inch at a time, coming up over top of this ridge. And I see his antlers, right? And he's kind of at an angle, but I'm above him. Probably I ranged his head at 37 yards. Okay. And I get up and I get to the top, and now I take a little bit more of a step. And now I can see his neck. I take a little bit more of a step. Now I can see his body, right? He's bedded down still, and he's looking away, and his ears are pinned straight back. He's looking forward. He has no clue I'm there. So I'm adjusting my feet ever so slightly just so I get a good base so I can draw my bow, right? And as I adjust my feet, there's this little crack or two rocks clicking together, and he kind of perks up. He doesn't stand yet, but he's perked up. So it's like something got his attention. And I'm like, I am so screwed now, right? I'm going to have to make this happen now. So I draw back, and like I said, his head was at 37 yards, stood up, right? So he stands up, and he's kind of glassing, but his body goes back to relaxed, right? I draw back, and at that angle, you can't get a double lung shot, right? Because I'm straight above him, right? So my goal is to blow out one lung. That's what I'm thinking. So at this angle, you're aiming higher on the body, but you're imagining that the arrow is going to come out right between his two front legs. Or, you know what I mean? So at that angle, I'm drawn back, and it's like behind the shoulder, but up higher on the body. And as I'm going through my shot process, hold, squeeze. And as I squeeze the trigger, he takes a backward step. I watch his whole body shift in my sight casing, and I drill him, complete pass through, not where I was aiming, but a little bit up higher on the body. And he drops down, pops back up on the other side of the drainage, complete pass through. And I see blood start to pump out of his shoulder. It's like up on the shoulder, and let's see, up. If you're looking at a deer shoulder broadside, it would have been if you took the leg kind of right up, but at that angle, I thought, dude, I got one lung, and he was bleeding really good. So I run up and then he disappears. I run up to the top of the hill, and I'm glassing him, And the other guy gets his binos, grabs a spotting scope, runs to a different point, and we're watching him run away. And he runs a really long way. And I'm like, dude, I feel like I got one lung on this buck. I feel like I got one lung. And so he drops down into this coulee, I guess you would call it, or this another little drainage. We see him. Oh, he's probably not quite a mile, half a mile away, and his tail's flippering, his back legs are getting wide. I'm just like, he's gonna bed down right there. He's gonna lay down right there, and we're not gonna move. And then it was almost like he was shaking it off. Like he starts to shake his head, and then he trots up a little ways, and he starts to get wobbly, shakes his head, wobbles, gets up on the flats again, the plateaus again, and he starts trotting away. I'm like, what the hell? Like I feel like I got a really good shot. And by this time, he's a good chunk away, but his entire body is red, like from the blood. Like his whole side is red. And you don't need a rocket scientist to say he's hurt. And while he's on this flat, he's taking these wider, like left, right, wider steps, and his back end seems to be going down. His head's going down, and then he shakes his head, and he's like, it's almost like he's pumping himself up to make it further. And he goes across this flat top, drops back down into another drainage, and that's where we lose sight at him. And then me and Dan meet back up, and he's like, dude, you got good blood, man. He's dropping, but what you have to realize is it's hard to follow a blood trail in this waist high grass, right? You've probably killed a deer before in CRP or something like that. Yeah. And I don't care unless you smoke them and it's just spraying out like a super soaker. It's hard to find blood in this. And I shot him high. So, it was coming up and then draining down his side, but I wasn't 100% sure of where the exit wound was at, but I was assuming, oh shit, man, I passed through, he's going to bleed, he's going to leak. And, the last thing I remember is him wobbling, going down into a drainage. I said, that's where we're going to find him, man. He's going to go lay down right in there and we're going to find him. Well, it's starting to get dark at this point. And so I'm like, hey, let's hustle up. Let's go to this drainage. So, I want to get a good idea. He stopped in this one area, this one area where there was hardly any grass, real low grass. So we make it to that point. I find a big pile of blood, and then we, through marking a location through my binoculars, I'm like, okay, we got to make it to that tree. Well, in Iowa, if you shoot an animal and it jumps onto private ground, you have the right to go do that. In South Dakota, you do not have the right to do that. You have to have landowner permission to hop the fence and go find this animal. Mm-hmm. Well, this buck ends up crossing a fence, and that's where the track job stopped. And so from this point, I start to get freaked out. I'm like, okay, I got to find landowners. We're looking at our phones, landowner can't, and obviously nobody lives around where these ranches are at, right? All they are is crop ground or like these circles, but there's nobody that lives on them. So I'm texting, we're looking for phone numbers, and it's hard to find a phone number. So we're like, okay, let's go back to the truck. Let's wait overnight. And let's start up first thing in the morning. We go back. The first thing we do when we wake up is knock on a couple of doors. Nobody's home. It's almost like they're summer houses for people when they're working cattle. And so then we go down another couple miles. Finally, we get a hold of a guy, and he's like, yeah, okay, well, that's not my property, but I have his phone number. I will call him, and I will let him know that you're going to be on his property looking for the deer. If you run into anybody, you tell him I said it was cool. I'm like, hey, man, that's good enough for me. Okay. And because this dude's property bordered another guy's property, he said he was going to make a phone call for us. So we go back to the drainage that we saw him in, start at the very top, and we're each on both sides. We can't find blood because it's that waist high tumbleweed grass again, hop the fence, and there's some blood. And we're following his tracks, fresh tracks, following his blood. And we come to a point where it looks like his knee went down into the dirt, like he was getting ready to lay down. All right. One thing I did not tell you is that as we're cooking supper at the truck, coyotes start going off.
Hey.
And they're going off close to where we left the blood trail. They were going off. I bet you there was one 100 yards from the truck going off. And they were going off for a while, and we could hear them move. Go back there, and then, long story short, we started grid searching lots and setting up in binoculars. We did that for over 7 hours looking for this thing. Could not find him. And I just was like, are you kidding me? Like, I felt like I drilled this animal and I should find him. Did we go in too aggressive to this drainage? And even though he was on public or private ground, he saw us coming? Or did the coyotes bump him? You start having that doubt in, like, what did I screw up my shot? What happened? And I still honestly don't know what went wrong in this whole scenario. I think it was just a kind of a combination of everything, not being able to track him right away. Coyotes came through. Maybe when he shifted his body weight backwards, it's like he stood up, but he was still in a bedded stance. To get more of a comfortable stance, he took a backwards step. I don't know. And it all kind of happened while I was pulling the trigger. I shot maybe higher up on the body, but I felt like, dude, that's still one lung I got. And, deer can die on one lung. And, then here we are with no mule deer. Just absolute, and then you're just in doubt the whole, you think about it over and over and over and over and over and over. Like every day, I still think about it. The entire ride home, I was thinking about it. And it sucks, man, because it was a really good buck. I mean, it wasn't as big as the other guys, but it was a 4x4, really big body, from what I could tell. And I was completely calm. And I'll tell you why in the stock is because in a stock like this, it's not like in a tree stand where a deer comes by and you have to draw and shoot it. I'm not even thinking about the shooting the deer at this point, because my mind is, and you can't even shoot the deer until you get until you can see it. So I'm thinking about every step. I'm cognizant of my wind direction, right? All these other things you're thinking about except the shot until you need to make the shot. So, I drew back and I wasn't even nervous. It was like I was practicing. I wasn't even thinking that this was the very first buck mule deer I was ever going to shoot. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking about like the steps, and it was like I was practicing. That's how calm I was. So I don't want to, I didn't even have buck fever. And I don't know. Just shit.
So would you do anything different?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm looking back at this, I said, I was looking back at this and I was saying, okay, so I put a marginal shot on my whitetail last year, right? But eventually I found him, right? I did not want that to happen to this deer. So I was practicing good. My bow was tuned in. I think if anything, I may have took a little bit of a higher angle, try to get up the hill just a little bit more on him to where I was even shooting more straight down on him and not, I don't know, there was an angle, but not like a straight down angle. So if I would have hit the same place that I hit with this deer, it just would have went almost straight down into his body. You know what I mean? So I was like shooting straight down. So you think back at that, and I don't think I did anything wrong. I honestly don't think I did anything wrong other than that buck shifting while I was going through my trigger squeeze process.
Animals, wild animals, you can never know for sure what they're going to do, how they'll react to things. I mean, that is the always unknown variable that can screw up the best laid plans. That's for sure.
It really sucks because I've had some critics in the past. You know, I know we talked about it once about, you know, when you asked me on my whitetail hunt, Dan, would you take that shot again? I said, yeah, dude, I'd take that shot again on a hard quartering away shot. And I had some critics, you know, leave comments about that. And I don't want to think about it, but it made me think about like, oh, Jesus, I'm going to get shit on for this because it's a deer I didn't find and I shouldn't have taken the shot. But I'm just like, I don't think I did anything wrong. You know, this is my first ever spot and stalk. So this is a completely new experience for me. I felt I did everything that I was supposed to do. Maybe at the moment of truth, I should have just chilled for one more second. But with that, the rock making a noise and he perked up, I thought, oh man, he's tense, but his body language kind of calmed down a little bit again. I just don't want him to bolt out of there and lose an opportunity. It's right here in front of me, and I took it.
What do you take from this moving forward then? For your next hunt, is there anything different that are you going to practice in any kind of way differently? Are you going to think about things differently, or is it, you know what, like you just said, you know, I did everything I could have. I'm just going to try to get better in all facets and try again.
Yeah, I will definitely be practicing different between now and next year because I'm definitely going on this hunt again. I'm going to practice shooting out of my treehouse straight down on targets or on my deck or even out of a tree stand or something to simulate these really steep, awkward angles that, you know, you put yourself in.
Yeah.
Not everything's broadside. I mean, and to be honest with you, I think that's how most of the deer are shot out there or you know, you locate them, let them get to bed and then shoot them in their beds. Yeah. Get above them and shoot them in their beds. So I guess just more practice in that type of scenario.
Right. Yeah. That is a unique kind of shot compared to, you know, what you typically plan on for elk, obviously not elk, and for deer, whitetail deer too. So yeah, that's a good thing to be thinking about. So what about this next year? Let's say you don't rack up enough brownie points or work's busy, or you've got a sixth kid or something like that. And you only can pick one Western hunt for next year. Do you go elk hunting again, or are you going to do this mule deer hunt again?
Oh, that's a tough one, man. You know, I'm not getting any younger, so I should probably do an elk hunt just from a physical standpoint. But there's better odds, I feel, going after mule deer. Now, I honestly think that we had an exceptional trip out there. I've had a lot of guys reach out to me and say, hey, dude, congratulations on your trip. Sounds like you guys got into them. It doesn't happen like that every year.
Yeah.
So be thankful for that. And that kind of put it all into perspective where, you know, you're right. We ran into it. So we shouldn't be expecting the same thing to happen next year. But what I will say is this was a very fun hunt. And if you were to ask me right now and then ask me again, I think this summer, it would probably change. But as of right now, I'd probably go on this mule deer hunt again.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you had a good experience. I am sorry that the end moments did not go as we would all want them to, but I trust that you'll come out of it, learn something, and on to next year.
Yeah. Yeah, buddy. I don't know, man. I'm jacked up. Like now I just turn the page to whitetails.
Yep. Onward and upward.
Onward and upward.
I will keep my update real short. because you gave
Sorry,
us
I took a lot of time.
you gave me more than I was expecting on the Cliff Notes, but it was good stuff, so I will take it. It was a hell of a hunt. I will simply just set the stage then, and then our next episode, you'll get to hear from us after the hunt, how the whole thing goes. But yeah, tomorrow night, me and Furter and our buddy Andy are taking off for northern Minnesota, right there on the Canadian border into the Boundary Waters Wilderness area. And we're driving through the night, Tuesday night. We're going to get there Wednesday morning, get our rental canoes and our wall tent and our wood-burning stove and a few other pieces of equipment, and then driving to our entry point. We're going to load up the canoes with all of our gear for a week, and we are going to paddle a river for something like 4 to 5 miles, and then we're going to get to a lake, and then there's a chain of lakes from there that we can either set up camp in the first one, hunt around there, or portage to another lake, explore that, portage to another lake, check that out, and we're going to see if we can survive it. We're going to see if we can find a deer. Anything legal is our goal, so I think it's going to be tough to find any deer. So we're going to have realistic expectations on that front.
Have you talked or looked at any information about success rates in this area with archery equipment?
Basically, it's relatively unheard of. Like, anyone we've talked to is like, oh, you're going to go in bow season? It's a very low success rate during gun season. But the only people we found that actually do this often, they do it during rifle. So we're expecting zero pressure with the bow. But, it's something like 3 to 4 deer per square mile or something like that. 4 or 5 deer a square mile is like the estimated deer density. So very low deer numbers.
Is this Andy May you're going with?
No, Andy Bradley.
Okay.
So, we're just going to try to find anything, and we're going to fish in the morning and try to feed ourselves with walleye for dinner or whatever we can catch, and scout and hunt in the afternoons, and maybe even shoot a grouse or two. We're going to get our small game license and kind of do a cast, blast, and whitetail hunt. So nice. It is going to be a full suite experience. That's for sure.
Right. So how many acres are you going to be tooling around in?
Oh man, I mean, it's like
thousands.
I think
and thousands and thousands.
It's a 1.1 million acre wilderness area.
Gotcha.
And like wilderness with a capital W. So this is like an official wilderness, which means no mechanized travel. So you can't take motorized boats. You can't drive into it. You can't even take a mountain bike into it. You got to go by foot or canoe. And so rugged terrain. It's deep big woods and rocky kind of terrain. It's this Precambrian Canadian Shield rock features down in that area. So you've got these rocky islands and rocky shorelines and beautiful glacial lakes, lots of fish, and a few deer strolling around inside of it all. There's lots of moose and bears and wolves. So we'll be right in the middle of it and just trying to figure it out as we go. So big
awesome.
Big cold front, snow and stuff came through over the weekend, and I think it's going to be petering out just about the time we get there. So we're not sure if it's going to be really wet and nasty or if we'll be able to get out of there just afterwards and it'll clear up and be nice, but it's going to be cold. I know that. Yeah. So we got a wall tent and a wood burning stove that we're going to be able to set up in there and try to stay warm and try to stay dry. We got to be careful getting in and out of our canoes, and if you shoot something, loading up the canoe with all your hunting gear and a deer, that'll be different. So we're just going to try to be safe and get out of there in one piece and with all 10 of our toes.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Is there any cell coverage out there, or is all going to be like in the dark, maybe a satellite phone?
I'm pretty sure there's no cell service. So it's just going to be with our, I've got one of those InReach Explorers, so I can like send out a text message to just let my wife know I'm safe. And then I've got, has one of those SOS buttons. So if the shit really hits the fan and we need some kind of emergency help, we can radio for that essentially. But pretty much on our own. So we,
let me give you some advice. This is, you probably already have thought about this, but if you need to transfer something from one canoe to the next, take the extra time and go to the shore to do it, even if it's something simple. Yeah. Because I've been on a lot of canoe trips in the day, not for hunting, but just for recreation. And even something as simple as handing somebody something could drop, and then you lose that.
Yeah. We're gonna be safe. I think we're not gonna try to take any chances with that, because with the temperatures we're gonna have, if you get wet and then it's 25 degrees or 30 degrees or whatever it's gonna be, that's not a good situation. So
can you build fires?
Yeah, so we can build a fire, and we can have that wood burning stove piping in our wall tent, so we'll be able to get dry. But you don't want to put yourself in that position either way. So
right.
We'll do the full scoop in the next podcast. We'll explain the research we've done, all the work that went into putting this together, and our game plan and our strategy and how we're doing it. We'll cover all that. Awesome. I'll give a shout out right now to Furter. He did a wonderful job. I kind of, with all the other things I got going on, I kind of asked him if he would be willing to play point on doing a lot of research and talking to people and lining up our gear and everything, and did a wonderful job. So kudos to my buddy Josh, and hopefully we'll have a really good story for you in a week.
And I'm jacked for you, man. These are the kind of trips that I really like.
Yeah,
because you're essentially disappearing.
It's gonna be good just to get back into nature and not have to worry about the phone, not have to worry about social media. Just gonna very fully experience this place and these animals and our pursuit for them. So it's gonna be a very, as Ted Nugent likes to say, it will cleanse the soul. So that's the game plan.
Good job, man. Well, I'm jacked for you.
Thank you, sir. And I think this might be our longest intro ever. So thanks for sticking with us, folks. This is a long podcast here, but it's a good one. We got it's almost a two-parter. You could almost split it up in two podcasts, really, but I'm going to stick them together. We'll get that great mule deer story on the front. We're going to get a really interesting kind of almost a human interest piece here on the back half as we hear how Luke dealt with this once-in-a-lifetime experience. And then we'll get back at you next week. So let's shut this down here. Let's jump over to my chat with Luke Brewster, and I'll chat with you all soon on the Boundary Waters front shortly. All right, with me on the line now is Luke Brewster. Welcome to the show, Luke.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, I'm glad that we can have this chat. It's a unique chat for me even today, because what I'm most, I don't know if I'm most excited, but what makes you such an interesting guest to me is what you just told me like a couple minutes ago before we started recording this whole thing, which was that you listened to Wired to Hunt as one of the first things that helped you figure out how to get into bow hunting and stuff. And that is like the coolest thing I can hear. Anytime I get to meet someone who can point to Wired to Hunt as something that's helped them or that kept them excited through the season or whatever, that is like the best thing for me. So I'm just stoked that this has been a helpful thing for you in the past, and glad that now it's kind of led to you having some cool hunting experiences. That's awesome. So thank you for doing that, for listening, and for kind of following along with what I've got going on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I got to thank you for putting all the information and doing everything you do for us, some of the newer guys that are looking to get into it. I mean, so it started when I got out of the Marine Corps. It was getting too cold to fish. I'm an avid fisherman, so I started hunting with a buddy, and I was looking for more information. After I picked up a bow, trying to gather more information on how to really get into it, and I stumbled across your podcast, and I just listened to as many as I could. Headed out to Illinois and started hunting out there. So
and the rest is history, huh?
Yep.
So we were messaging on Instagram at one point, and you said that you were even following along with my whole Holyfield saga. So if you're familiar with that, anything I did wrong, do you have any advice for me? Because you obviously have figured out how to get it done with a buck after multiple years. What did I do wrong on that one?
Oh, man, to be honest, I pretty much just got lucky. I mean, I did everything right that I was supposed to do, but in terms of kind of patterning him, I honestly just got kind of lucky.
Well,
he wasn't close to where I mean, he was pretty close, but probably like a mile away from where we had pictures of him at. So he caught me by surprise.
That's amazing. Let's set the stage for this whole thing first. So,
All right.
So you got into bow hunting after the Marine Corps. So you're an adult kind of onset bow hunter, right? And you're picking up stuff from podcasts and learning things as you go. When did you decide to start traveling out of state to go to Illinois? Because you're from Virginia, right?
Right.
And so you start heading to Illinois, just looking for a different experience, or hoping to see more mature bucks, or what led to you starting to make that trip?
Okay, so the first year I went hunting, my dad used to hunt when I was a kid. I never went with him, kind of too young, I guess. But so my dad kind of helped me out. We have farmland out in Illinois, and I have about 40 acres of wooded, and then the family that does my dad's farming, he has about 160 acres wooded, and it's agriculture country out, in Illinois where I hunt, so it's pretty much hunting a lot of windbreaks and stuff out there. But back to the question, I hunted here in Virginia like late season with my dad's rifle, and kind of trying to figure out, ways I can hunt other places and ways to access more places to hunt, so I can go out and try to figure things out, less pressured. And so I started looking into archery, and I went to a few shops and picked up a few bows and shot a bunch, and kind of got some tips from the archery shop on, form and everything. And so I ended up buying one late season that year. And then the next year, the whole summer leading up to the next season, I had been talking to my dad about wanting to go out to Illinois to hunt our family land. And so I started planning that out and talked to the farmer's family and set that up to go out there for that season. And ended up going out there and meeting the guys that I hunt with out there now. And we just hit it off and really clicked right off the bat. And they kind of took me under their wing because my dad had given them permission to hunt our land way back when I was little. So they felt it was right to kind of invite me in and let me hunt with them.
That's great. That's great. So how many years did you go to Illinois before you killed this buck, or is it that first year you got to go down there?
It was actually, I'd been there twice before this previous season. So the first year I went out there, I ended up getting a good lesson on archery and, your angles of your shot. I had a nice buck come in on me. I got a little bit of buck fever going on when he came in, and the way that he came in, he kind of came like right under the stand pretty much, and I didn't think about the exit of the arrow, and I ended up one-lunging him, and so that was my first bad experience with bow hunting, which taught me a valuable lesson. One that I think about every time, I draw back on a deer.
Yeah. So what did you do from that point on then? I kind of looking into a little bit of your background and stuff, it seems like you take archery pretty serious now, a lot of practice. I saw you talking about practicing even out to 100 yards. Sounds like you really put a lot of work into figuring that all out. Is that right?
Yeah, so another outlet that I really got into was John Dudley's Knock on TV.
Oh yeah.
He's like, he's the guru of the archery world, I feel like. So yeah, I'd paid a lot of attention to him and watched a lot of his stuff, and me and my buddies would be challenging ourselves out, shooting at different distances, just having fun, and that's where I got into kind of longer range shooting and just having fun with it, honestly.
Yeah, and I gotta believe, right? I've always imagined and thought from my experience that if you get competent shooting extremely long ranges while just practicing, it makes those closer 30, 40-yard shots or even 20-yard shots, makes those so easy, or easier at least in the moment when you can stretch it out in practice, right? It just prepares you even better.
Exactly. Yep, that's my whole philosophy is, you shoot out farther, feel a lot easier about those other shots.
Yeah. So you start heading to Illinois. You've got some new friends now that are hunting that farm with you, and this massive buck shows up on trail camera. And as I understand it, it was for several years they were getting some pictures. In 2017, he was a giant, so you knew this giant buck was out there. In 2018, he's back, and he's obviously next level. What were you
Right.
thinking? What were you and your buddies thinking when you saw this buck on trail camera and you knew that you might be hunting him? Was this something that was exciting? Was it stressful? I'm wondering because, like, just for me, in Michigan, I had the biggest buck I've ever been able to hunt in Michigan showed up last year, and it was really exciting. But at the same time, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like a whole new level of pressure. This like kind of
Yeah.
once in a lifetime opportunity for me here in Michigan. And that was a very different experience for me. Did that feel different at all for you when you have that kind of buck around?
Yeah. So I was more excited. It's kind of like almost, I thought of that about it like kind of winning the lottery. Like all these thoughts would run through my head. Like, what if I did this? What would happen? Like, would it be life changing or whatever? I wasn't really nervous because honestly, I didn't really think I'd ever see him. Pretty much stayed nocturnal the previous years. And my buddy Justin, he had a shot at him the previous year, but the arrow deflected off a branch and he didn't show up anymore. But yeah, I was honestly just more excited, and just the thought of, being able to put a tag on him kept me up quite a few nights.
Yeah, I bet.
Especially the days leading to, but I wasn't really too nervous because, it's one of those things that if he comes around, he comes around. If he doesn't, then, still enjoying the outdoors.
Yeah, that's a good attitude to have. Well, then it happens, right? The 2018 season is there. Let's start like you make your trip out there. Walk me through what
Right.
happened once you arrived in Illinois for your 2018 trip. Walk me through the story.
All right. So I headed out there November 1st, and it was pretty much raining the whole entire drive out there. It's about a 10-hour drive from where I'm at in Virginia to eastern Illinois. And so it was raining the whole time, and I was thinking in my head, I'll actually listen to your podcast on the way out there, like I do every year. And then
That's great.
I get, I'm thinking in my head, you're talking to, I forget what podcast you were, what guest you had on or what was going on, but I just remember, there's going to be a lot of deer coming around freshening scrapes up, after this rain. And so I was hoping it would continue raining up until the next day when I could actually get out and hunt. And I get to Illinois, it's still like kind of drizzling. I meet up with Justin. He got off of work and we rode around and pulled some cards from the cameras and just talked about a lot of things, mainly about Mufasa and how the weather is going to be for the next week or so. And then we were talking about stand locations and everything. And we headed back to the house. He went to his house. I stayed at his father-in-law's house. So later on that evening, he checked some of the cameras. I believe he had some more pictures of Mufasa on them from the last time he checked when we first got pictures of him. We ended up picking our stands that night. I chose to sit on my 40 acres. They sat closer to where they had pictures of them. Justin and Ron, they're the two son-in-laws of the farmer. They chose to sit pretty close to where they had pictures of them. I decided to sit on my 40 acres just because they had been, I didn't want to put any pressure on them to, sit in like their spots. Like they've been the ones running the cameras and hanging stands and cutting shooting lanes and everything, while I'm here in Virginia. So I just felt it was right that, I don't try to intrude, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I sat on my 40 acres and I was, had a few does come in that morning.
What was that spot like, by the way? What was the spot you picked? What was the setup?
So the morning, I shot him in the evening, but the morning where I sat, it was just, it was actually pretty close to a doe bed. pretty much almost, I don't know, maybe 30 yards from a big doe bed, a lot of overgrown grass and kind of some immature trees. I had a few does, about like 4 or 5 does come in that morning, coming to bed, and no bucks were trailing them. So it's a nice spot. It's like it's got a nice creek that runs through it, makes a U shape, and a lot of deer will cross the creek and come over and come up this embankment and come and check the doe beds.
Okay.
It's quite a distance from where Mufasa, his area was. But yeah,
Okay.
I just figured I'd sit there. If good sized buck came to, like I had in my head that I wouldn't be able to. I didn't think I was going to be putting eyes on Mufasa.
Yeah. So
So
what were your goals?
I was just going to shoot the first mature buck I saw.
Okay.
And so that morning I didn't. I just saw the does. About 4 or 5 does come into the bedding area and settle in there. And about like 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30, we decided to get down and go get some breakfast and discuss some more stands and meet up with Ron and talk with him and Justin. So we go to breakfast. They're at a cafe, kind of about like 20 minutes away, and I forget what Ron and Justin had to do. I think they had to do something at their houses or something. And so, I'll go back to at breakfast. So we were discussing stand locations, and Justin had pointed one out to me on the map that I didn't have marked on my GPS, and he said the stand's been there for about 5 years, and they haven't moved it, and they're talking about taking it down, but nobody shot it in about 5 years or so. So that one kind of stuck out to me. It had good wind for that day or that evening sit. I kept that in the back of my mind. So after that, after breakfast, I headed back to the farmer's house and was getting ready for the evening sit, and we're all texting each other which stands we're going to go to. I believe Ron chose first. He wanted to sit close to where we had pictures of him, that camera where Mufasa was moving. Then I picked next, and I picked the same stand that Ron picked because I was confused on what stand he was talking about. And Justin said, "Hey, Ron had chose that one." So I was thinking about what my next move was, and I told the guys, "Hey, I'm going to go sit in that stand that hadn't been sat in 5 years." And it's like a mile south of where they're at. It had good wind. It was like a northwest wind, kind of a creek bottom. Perfect wind for movement going west to east, east to west.
Okay.
Yeah, I told them I was going to sit in that stand. They're fine with that. Justin chose another stand that was kind of close to where Ron was sitting. I get out there a little bit earlier than them, like about an hour and a half or so. So I pull up to the access road. I park my truck. I get dressed, start making my way towards cutting across the cornfield, making a beeline straight for the woods. And because I hadn't been to that stand before, I was kind of confused as to where it was at. And I'm looking at my GPS. I'm looking up in the trees, and it was actually hidden in this beautiful Osage orange tree that was just wicked. It had vines everywhere. It was awesome concealment. And I actually walked across the trail that Mufasa came in on quite a few times just looking for the stand. And so I found the stand. I get up in there, and I'm getting settled and hang my bow up and just getting settled. And I start ranging everything around me, try to get an idea of like, the just different ranges so that I can keep that in the back of my head. And while I'm doing that, I noticed a scrape like right off the deer trail. And I ranged that at 26 yards. I kept that in the back of my head and started ranging other things. And so I got an idea of, what yardages I'm gonna be shooting at from that tree stand. And so I sit there for about probably about 3 or 4 hours, and I start catching some movement off to the east. And it's 2 days. They're coming in and they're acting a little weird. I thought maybe the wind was swirling a little bit down there, and maybe they caught wind of me, and that's why they're kind of high stepping and bobbing their heads, kind of cautiously walking, towards me from east to west. And then so I lose them in the thicket. I'm watching them through my binos. I lost them in the thicket. And, so I bring down my binos, and I catch some more movement to my left. It's like, I don't know, 30 yards from me, and it's Mufasa. He's coming in, and he's walking on the trail that I just trudged all over, looking for the stand.
Oh, man.
And he's making his way over to the scrape that I ranged at 26 yards. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, it's him. And I'm like, I just kind of froze, and I snapped out of it, and I was like, all right, I got to do something. And I look at his rack, and I was like, all right, I can't look at his rack anymore. I got to focus on his body. I picked a spot on his body that I wanted to shoot at, and I just focused on that. So by the time he gets to the scrape, I've already hung up my binders. I grab my bow, and I'm being really smooth and, very cautious about every movement I make. And so he pawed up the dirt about, I don't know, a couple of times, 3 or 4 times. And by then, I get the full draw, and I'm going through everything, my checklist in my head of how I need to make the shot, everything that I need to do to make a good shot. And so I get the full draw, and I've got my pin settled on them. My bubble is good. I got my anchor points. Everything's perfect. I've made sure my arrow is going to clear any branches or any limbs that may deflect my arrow. And he starts flicking the branch above him, and that's when I squeeze my release and let it eat. And it hit him. It made a pretty loud noise. I thought I had actually hit his shoulder blade, and it looked like a good shot, but that noise kind of got in the back of my mind, like, because I shoot an expandable, mechanical, and I was just nervous. I was nervous about it, but at the same time, the shot looked good. It felt good. So it was in the back of my mind. He takes off and crosses this creek, and I hear he runs through the thicket or past the thicket, and I hear a loud crash. And I didn't know if he had run into, a log or something, maybe fell, got up, walked off, whatever. So I sit there and I'm, thinking about everything in my head that just happened, trying to calm myself down, and I'm texting the guys, telling them what happened, just shot Mufasa. Everyone's in disbelief and like, are you serious? Are you sure? And so I'm up in the tree. I just shot Mufasa. I pulled up my binos, and I'm like checking for blood, looking for blood anywhere around that scrape that he was just at, and I'm not seeing anything. When he took off, the arrow was pinwheeling. It had actually, the arrow had penetrated all the way through him, but when he took off, he snapped the arrow in half inside of him, and the broadhead side went flying somewhere, and I saw the knock into the arrow spinning, doing a pinwheel as he took off, and so it kind of made me a little uneasy seeing that.
So, a few things just before you go any further.
Yeah.
How did you keep so dang collected when he was coming in like that, and you were able to stay focused and like think through your checklist and making sure those things are all spot on before taking the shot. I mean, that's a hard thing to do with any buck, let alone this buck. Were you doing a lot of self-talk? Did you have to ever like control your breathing? I mean, I don't know what could be going on physically, but I got to believe maybe some shakes or some seriously fast heart pumping. Was that a thing? Or were you just like, for whatever reason, you were in that Zen mode and it just worked out perfectly?
Yeah, it's the thing. I didn't have to watch them come in. If I had to watch them come in, my arrow would probably be in the next county over. So when I first saw him, he was at 30 yards. So I didn't really have time to watch him. You know, I didn't have time for all that nervousness. And
that's a good point.
You know, to kind of cloud my mind. So yeah, I just kind of went in autopilot mode.
Yep.
And just focused on his body and told myself I have to make this happen. I have to make this happen.
Yeah, that's great, man. I wish I could be that cool. I'm still trying to figure out how to get better at that myself. So you get the shot. You're a little nervous about it. You text your buddies. What's your mental state at this point? Did you now lose it? Did you lose your cool, calm collectedness and freak out, or were you just nervous? Or at this point, like, are you allowing yourself to be happy? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I did a few fist pumps. You know, I still have that nervousness, but I did a few fist pumps, and I texted my buddies, and kind of asked them, you know, what next step should I do? Should I be getting down in a half an hour and kind of checking out the scene, like where I shot them, or should I go to the truck and come back in like an hour or two? You know, give them some time. They said they're going to come down to me here shortly. So I was just like, all right, well, I'll wait in the tree for a half an hour and get down and head to the truck and maybe meet them there. I get down from the tree. I couldn't take it. I had to go and check them out, check out the area.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, so I snuck up over there and I'm looking for blood. I'm not seeing anything. And it made me just feel back to the same sick feeling I had after I saw my arrow pinwheeling around them. I'm like, all right, well, let me at least find the arrow. I'm walked about like 10 yards from where I shot him in the direction he went, and I find the arrow. It was snapped in half. It's missing a good, I don't know, 9 inches, 10 inches of the arrow, and it's got about 12 inches of blood on it, on the arrow. And I'm seeing a little bit of blood on the foliage, on the ground, and I start following that a little bit. Wasn't very big, wasn't too much. I walked about another, I don't know, 5 yards to the creek they jumped across, and I see his footprint there, and I pick my head up, and I'm just kind of glassing left to right, and I see a big rack sticking up, and I'm like, there's no way that's him. And I was just like, instantly pulled out my phone, texted the guys, I got eyes on them, and they're all telling me congratulations and everything, and I put my phone back in my pocket, and I knock another arrow, and I start creeping my way over to him, being as quiet as I can. Then if he was just bedded down because he was injured or something, I didn't want to jump him. Or if I did, I would want a follow-up shot.
Mm-hmm.
So I start making my way over to him, and confirmed he was down for good, and did my celebration and sat down with him and just checked him out and thanked him for everything he had, done for me and the guys, all the excitement over the few years, and the meat was provided to me and my family. So
yeah. What was that like? Was it any different than any other deer you killed, or was it the same, like you described, the gratitude, excitement, I'm sure. But what all was going through your mind at that point?
I was honestly in disbelief. I was just I don't know. It was weird. It was kind of a weird feeling. It was something else.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe. It was kind of sad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
My buddies have been chasing them too. I kind of felt bad for them. I was kind of sad that, you know, this mythical creature that, you know, has been so hard to put a tag on. He's not going to be chased no more. And
Yeah.
I was pumped, you know, I was excited, I was excited. Kind of felt a little drunk right after I walked up on him. You know,
Yeah.
when I picked up his, when I was checking him out, looking at the rack and everything, I noticed the fresh break, and so I was kind of thinking about that as well. Like, all right, well, I noticed this, and I'm pretty sure he had something right here, and it was pretty fresh. So I decided to retrace my steps, and by the time he had jumped over the creek, the entrance and exit wound really opened up, and it was just like a huge red carpet all the way to him, from the creek to him. So started backtracking and following his trail. About like, I don't know, 10 yards from him was a tree that he ran into. That was the loud crash I heard. And he had broken off that big club drop tine. He had snapped that off when he crashed. So I ended up finding that at the base of the tree, and it matched up perfectly with the fresh break, and so I was able to keep that, and Pope and Young was able to count that in the score, which definitely benefited.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's for anyone who's not seen pictures of the deer, it's a wildly unique animal. I mean, how do you even try to describe that to someone? I mean, if someone's like, what did it look like?
It looked like a tree root system, you know?
Yeah.
A root ball. It's just it's unreal. He put on over 100 inches this year. I don't know if it's because they switched in the field from corn to beans because it had been, or from corn to beans because it had been corn like the previous 2 years or something like that. I don't know what it was, but he had the genetics. He was showing the potential last year. He had some non-typical points coming off, but I mean, he just blew up.
Yeah,
just
a crazy, crazy, unique animal and beautiful. I mean, just a really, really special creature.
Yeah.
What happens after this? That's something that, like, I understand what it feels like to see a big animal come in that you've been thinking about for years or weeks and weeks and weeks. I know what that excitement's like. I know what it's like to walk up on a deer and put your hand on his chest and have that gratitude and that sorrow and that excitement. I know what that feels like. What I don't know about is what happens after you have an experience like that with such a rare, like a world-class animal that no one has ever seen before or killed before like this. What starts happening next? I mean, did people show up at your door that night? Were there, I mean, what happened over the next day or the next couple hours? Describe to me what I'm guessing was maybe some hysteria of some kind. Did that happen?
Yeah, like the social media outrage and
what goes on?
Crazy. Yeah, so I don't have Facebook. I kind of deleted that like 2 years before this had all happened. So I've just been on Instagram really. So I sent the pictures to my buddy after it happened here in Virginia, and he posted it on a page, and it just made its rounds to pretty much every archery, or every hunting page or a lot of the hunting pages. And I guess the game warden was getting a lot of emails saying you need to go check this deer out, check this out. So that night I went to bed. Well, one of my Justin's buddies, he'd been telling Justin, hey, you guys need to keep that deer locked up. You need to keep it secured. So it's kind of like there's a few crazy people out there, and you just don't want something, like that getting, stolen or destroyed or something because of jealousy or something like that. So I ended up locking them up, and I went to bed that night. Well, tried to. I probably only slept about like maybe 2 hours. Just the excitement, everything that just happened, it just kept replaying everything over in my head. And so the next day or next morning, Justin had asked me if I wanted to have one of his buddies come out, or his dad's buddy come out and take some good photos with his camera. And I said, yeah, let's do that. Let's go ahead and get that planned. So he took some pictures around like 9 o'clock, and we're getting some good field pictures, some good hero pictures. Some of the field pictures, I guess there's a lot of people complaining about there being too much blood and stuff like that. So got some good hero pics, and next thing I know, the game warden's pulling down the driveway, and I just got done taking some pictures with him and started talking to the game warden. He's checking everything out, make sure everything's, on the up and up, and everything was, and made sure everything was good. And after that, I started trying to figure out, where do I go next? Go to the taxidermist and get them caped and ready for that, and get them to the processor.
Was this throughout that process? Was it still fun, or did it start getting stressful? Like when the game, was that a stressful situation?
Yeah. Even though you did everything you're supposed to, and you're all cleared, you checked on everything, you're still nervous.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sure.
It's just one of those things that no matter if you're in the right, you're still going to feel like there's something that you can do wrong.
Oh yeah, it's like driving down the road.
Stories.
Oh yeah.
You hear all these horror stories about people, and things that some game wardens, games that they might play or something. But all in all, I had a great experience with the game wardens out there. They're all nice, and they're fair. They're good guys.
That's great. So you got all checked out with the game warden, everything's cleared.
Yeah, that was probably the best thing that had happened, because everyone on social media, well, not everyone, but there's a handful of people on social media saying he's a high fence deer and this and that, and the game warden came by and took pictures of him and got the story and took pictures of his ears, because if there's a hole in his ear, then that would mean he had a tag, and he's high fence, came from a high fence place. So he got his proof that he needed to put out a statement to the public saying, hey, it's a free range deer.
That's great. That's great. That must have been just a nice relief, so that you didn't have to have that criticism. And I got to believe,
right,
your situation is so interesting to me, because just in doing what I do, like just sharing my stories and my pictures and everything through social media for Wired to Hunt, and telling stories on the podcast and everything, just putting myself out there to that degree, I get so much flack for stuff. There's so many comments where people nitpick what I did, or disagree with what I did, or question what I did. And a big thing for me over the last few years is that happens more and more, is I've had to learn how to deal with like public critique. And I've had to, in some cases, like just stop listening to stuff. Like there's certain places I know if someone shares my video on, I don't know, certain places I know there's going to be people in that audience who don't like me as much or whatever, and they're going to critique me for this thing or that thing. And I've had to just start to not look at stuff, because it impacts me. It negatively influences my mood for a couple hours, or ruins my night, and I don't need that. So I've had to try to find ways to avoid that did you have to deal with that at all? Did the social media stress and comments and public opinion, did that ever get to a point that it was negatively impacting you, stressing you out? Like, how do you deal with that? Because I gotta believe there's a whole lot of talk going on around this, right?
Yeah. So at first I was like, I didn't care at all. I was like, whatever. This means that I did something good and people are jealous and hating, people are going to hate or, try to downplay, something awesome that happened.
Yeah.
And I get the people questioning things because if I was in their shoes, I would have been like, that probably would have been the first thought that had popped into my head without reading or hearing a story or anything or knowing anything about it. It's like, is that a high fence deer? So I get that some people, but I mean, even after the story's out, the game warden gave his thumbs up and everything that, all the proof that's out there, I figured it would shut a lot of people up, but you still get it. I still get it every now and then, but I guess it's just one of those things. And yeah, at first it didn't bother me at all, but then after a little while, I kept hearing it and kept getting it. And there's been a lot of people that have had my back and, pretty much vouched for me and vouched for the deer and everything. So it's nice to have that support. But
oh yeah,
it kind of bothered me a little bit, but now it's just like whatever. I just keep on scrolling past it.
Keep on keeping on.
I think they pretty much just want attention or something. I don't know.
Now, what
person just not give it to them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, what about the regular media, not social media, but actual reporters, magazines? I don't know. I mean, podcasters like me. Did that start happening right away? Were people reaching out to you? Or what's that look like? What happens in that kind of situation?
So I guess like the first few weeks it was kind of heavy a little bit. People wanting to get a hold of me from magazines and stuff like that, different publications, just a handful of people wanting to get a hold of me about everything, and kind of put it on hold for a little bit because just wanted to kind of settle in and figure things out. Put a lot of it on pause. Just figured I'd just take it slow. Didn't really want to do too much until after the score. So yeah, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I figured it was, I'd have everyone and their mother coming after me for something or other, but it really wasn't too bad. I guess for a lot of people that I've been talking to recently, they've kind of said they wanted to wait till the dust settled to get a hold of me. So kind of got like a second wave, like quite a few months later. It was just like, okay, here's another wave coming in of people that want to get some information or do a story or whatever.
Yeah. So did you find out pretty quickly that, hey, this is probably the largest, the highest scoring deer ever killed? Like, was that something that you knew pretty quickly when someone scored it? And did that like sink into you? What did that mean to you? Was that like a thing like, oh, well, that's cool, but either way, it's a massive, like, amazing experience in deer? Or was it like, did that change things somehow in your head and this became like a holy shit moment? Like, what was that like?
Yeah. So I think because I'm fairly new to hunting. I mean, I grew up around it, but I didn't really get into hunting until 5-6 years ago. So I'm still kind of new to it. And, it didn't really sink in, the inches didn't really matter to me, I guess. It was more about the maturity of the deer by the time I shot him. So, I mean, I was just happy to put a buck of that caliber down, I didn't really care about the inches or if he was a world record or anything. And so I didn't really, I don't know, I wasn't too hung up on that whole thing. I was just pumped to have, a good matured buck down. It was my second buck with a bow.
That's awesome.
Believe it or not. So
it's a great way to get started.
Yeah. Where do I go from now, though?
Yeah. Well, that is the question. Like,
Yeah.
How did this? So you kill this once in a lifetime for all of us buck. Where do you go from now? Did you like where's your head at for 2019? I've got a bunch more questions that I want to still get tackled
Yeah.
about what happened right after the buck. But since you
Right.
brought that up, where's your head at leading into this season? I don't know. How do you follow that up? What are you trying? Do you want to shoot a mature buck? Do you want to shoot a big buck? I don't know. I have no idea
Yeah.
what's got to be going through your mind.
So pretty much, yeah, I got to fill the freezer first and foremost. I don't really buy meat at the store ever, really. I just eat, what I get from the field. So first is fill the freezer, tag a few does, go out to Illinois and try to put a mature buck down. Got a few good ones on camera now. I mean, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I plan on kind of, I want to go out west. Not this year because I pretty much used up all my vacation from work. Doing things with Mufasa, going to a few shows and whatnot. So getting scored. I've just been back and forth across the country so much this year. Probably put about 20,000 miles on my truck so far, and
Jeez.
burned through a lot of vacation. So
Yeah.
my plan for next year after this season, the following season is I want to go to Idaho and go hunting out west, get that experience.
Yeah.
Because to me, hunting is more about like the experience. I mean, I love chasing whitetails, but there's just so much more, I want to experience.
I love it. I love it. I think you're right on, and I'm really glad that someone with that perspective is who killed a buck like the one you did. That's pretty cool. How is this inside look that you've gotten to get at the you've heard if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard us talk about this, like the kind of big buck media frenzy around high scoring antlers, right? Sometimes we talk about like, does it go overboard? Is there a negative side to this at all? You have now gotten thrust right into the middle of that. As a relatively new bow hunter, all of a sudden you kill the highest scoring deer that's ever been killed by a hunter. You're surrounded by media. People are wanting your picture. People are wanting your interviews. They're doing stories about you. People, I'm sure they want you, shooting their bow or using this thing or using that thing. Now that you've lived it, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like is it cool? Do you feel like there's a negative side to it? Do you feel like it's just a great positive thing? I'm just kind of curious about coming out of this, how it feels to you.
There's several things. It's kind of like picking up a second job. So I'm kind of a little bit overwhelmed with everything right now. But another thing is it's awesome to be able to share this deer with so many other people. I love going to shows and just talking to, regular people, regular hunters that just like to get out there. And, I love conversating with them and meeting new people. That's probably one of the most positive things I've gotten out of the experience, since putting a tag on them, is going out and just talking to people and just sharing the experience and letting them enjoy, what God has put on this earth for us to enjoy,
That's great.
From God's creation. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
That's probably the big positive right there. Is just being able to be the guy that gets to share such an awesome creature.
That's an amazing privilege. Now, have there been any downsides to it other than it just taking up a lot of your time? Anything that you experienced, like, man, that was kind of icky. Anything like that?
No, not really.
Good.
Just it takes up a lot of time. Yeah, just yeah, it's pretty much it. It just sucks a lot of time away from family and might put a little bit of shorten my hunting season this year, but I mean it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's plenty more years to come. So
That's true. I guess this probably isn't going to happen again, so you might as well soak it all in and really cherish this whole experience, I got to believe.
Yeah, but you never know. I mean,
You never know.
Nobody thought the BD buck was going to get broken. So
That's true.
or even the Tucker buck. So I mean, it could happen to anybody.
Yeah, that's the truth. Do you feel like you've changed at all coming out of this? Did this force you to change, to grow, I mean, maybe in hunting or maybe even outside of that? I just got to believe this is probably a life-changing experience. I'm just curious how it has changed your life.
I learned that I need to get more comfortable with being on the camera, or just, I don't know, just dealing with media type things. I don't know. It's kind of a little bit overwhelming at first because I'm just some nobody, from Virginia, and then I get thrusted into this big limelight and got cameras pointing at me everywhere and doing all this other stuff. It's a little overwhelming. Yeah, I mean, more time, I'm around it, the more comfortable I'll get. But it was one of those things I learned that, I need to grow to deal with, I guess.
Yeah. Do you feel like this is something, now having gotten all this attention, I guess, around this deer and this experience, do you want more of that? Like, do you hope that, hey, I'm going to get another big buck and I'll get to share that story? And like you express that you enjoy getting to share that experience and share that buck with other people. And like, that was a cool thing for you. So you're excited for more of that? Or are you feeling like, you know what, I'm kind of looking forward to eventually just like fading back into the shadows and getting my privacy back? Like, where are you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that from time to time, just like kind of sliding back into the shadows and just going out and hunting, just for my own peace and just doing my own thing. But at the same time, I'm like, well, if I thought about maybe filming some hunts in the future, just for, if not, to share on with other people, or just to have for myself, just to share with buddies and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's kind of up in the air, like what I want to do now. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a good position to be in. You can try new things, and I got to believe some cool opportunities have come out of this too.
Yeah.
Which has got to be fun.
Yeah. Yep.
So what about from a hunting standpoint? Like you said, kind of lightning struck and this crazy thing happened to you, but you obviously made some right decisions along the way too. Some was luck, some was being prepared for that luck to arrive. But now when you look back on the hunt itself and you look back on the situation and the couple of years that you've been going out there, did you learn anything from this experience from a hunting standpoint that now in 2019 you're going to be putting into action in some kind of way with your future hunts?
I haven't really thought about that.
Did you ever think about why? Did you ever think about why he was there? Like what led him to want to be there? Because I'm always kind of interested. Like I'll shoot a buck and then I'll sit back and say, okay. And this doesn't happen until long afterwards. Because when it just happens, I'm just excited and happy it happened. But long afterwards, I'll sit back and say, why did that happen? I set my stand there. I decided to hunt there because I thought something would happen. But what actually ended up being the case? And then I'll kind of sit there and BS with myself and try to think, well, he was coming from this direction. I bet you he was trying to do this. Or that doe walked in and that's why he was there. Did you ever get a couple quiet minutes to think back on that and kind of say, I think he ended up coming in here because he was moving here to, I don't know, wind a bedding area? Or do you think he was just on a scrape line? Or what do you think?
Right. So he doesn't ever show up. We don't have any summer pictures of him. We don't know where he summers at. He always shows up late October. And that's when we start getting pictures of him on camera. So he just shows up pretty much for the rut. And then after the season's over, he disappears, and we don't see him again until next season, right before the rut. So it's kind of one of those things. He lives somewhere else and comes over to chase the does around on the property and gets out of there. So I think what he was doing is he was bedded down. We actually got pictures of him the morning of the day I shot him. So he was headed down from where the guys were sitting. They passed a few cameras. He was actually walking the field edge out in the open around like 8 or 9 in the morning. 8. He was like right below where the guys were at.
Wow.
And he was headed down headed towards me where I sat that evening. And I guess he was going somewhere he felt safe to bed down. It was close to where, some other does were at. And so I think he bedded down on this point kind of close to where I was sitting. And I must have passed him on the way to the stand. And when I got to the stand, a few hours went by, he got up and started making his rounds to different scrapes and just freshening things up, getting his scent back out there.
And then there you were to ruin his day.
Yeah.
Man, what a hunt. I just can't imagine what an interesting experience this must have been for you. Now you're almost a year out from it. You've experienced the hunt itself. You've experienced the media hysteria around it. You've experienced all this additional events and things you've been going to and traveling the country and sharing the story with people. Sounds like there was some good stuff. There were some things that were stressful at moments too. Looking back on that part of things, is there anything you wish you'd done differently? Is there anything you wish you could go back and change or redo or anything, or did it all go the way you kind of hoped?
It's all pretty much gone the way I hoped. I mean, yeah, I really can't complain.
That's great.
Working with a few companies, some of the products that I've used. Yeah, I mean, luckily, some of the companies, the products that I use, they've been pretty awesome to me, helped me out with a few things. So help me out for the future seasons. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's terrific.
Definitely a bonus to it.
Oh yeah. So then my last question for you is probably an easy one, but I don't know, maybe not. If you are sitting in a tree, let's say you're in a double ladder stand, and just roll with this with me. Let's say you're in a double ladder stand. You and your best friend are sitting in that ladder stand together. Your buddy, he's hunting. He's got the bow. You don't have a bow. You're not going to shoot. You're just sitting with him for the night. And a buck shows up half an hour before the end of shooting light, comes walking in, and he stands in front of your buddy at 20 yards. And this buck is obviously the largest whitetail that's ever been seen in the wild before. It's bigger than the buck you killed. And your buddy turns to you and he says, "Hey, Luke, should I shoot him?" What would you say? Would you say, no, all the craziness, the stress, all the time it's going to take away from your family and friends, it's not worth it? Or will you say, yes, this is going to be the coolest thing that ever happened? Shoot.
Hell yeah, shoot that. Shoot him. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely. Don't turn down that opportunity.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, Luke, I appreciate you taking the time to share this whole experience. It's really cool that someone who just loves to be out there hunting, wants to meet, wants to have a great experience, wants to, every once in a while get a mature buck, that someone like that was able to capture lightning in a bottle and have a life-changing experience like this and share that story with people. So thanks for doing that, Luke, and for sharing it with us.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
And I guess the only thing I want to know is next time you've got one of these mega bucks in Illinois, will you just let me know about it so I can come down and check it out?
Yeah, definitely. We'll do.
All right, Luke. Well, good luck this season. I hope you have just as much fun in the coming weeks as you did last year.
Thank you. Good luck to you this season.
Appreciate it. And that is a wrap. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Long episode, 2 different unique topics, but we covered a whole suite of different things that hopefully can be helpful, maybe insightful, and definitely interesting. Good luck to all of you out there hunting. Stay tuned to the Meat Eater YouTube channel for another episode of the Back 40 coming soon. And over on the Wired Hunt Instagram, I'll have lots of updates for my Boundary Waters hunt and all the other good stuff we got going on. So check it out. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.